The cries had no rhythm, no pause, just a ceaseless wail that rose and fell like a siren in Elliot Hargrove's skull. The mansion, 35,000 square feet of hand-selected marble, ported glass, and brushed steel, was supposed to be a sanctuary. Now it echoed with sorrow, sterile and cavernous, filled with the sounds of grief in miniature form. Elliot stood barefoot in the hallway outside the nursery, shoulders hunched, hair wild with weeks of neglect. In each arm, a twin Aria in the left, Ezra in the right, both red-faced, screaming. Again, they never stopped, never slept. It had been 83 days since Naomi died. He hadn't marked it. His phone did, a pop-up reminder that used to signal. Date nights now marked anniversaries of absence. Naomi had been light, warmth, music in the kitchen, defiance in boardrooms, and now gone, just gone. He tried everything. White noise machines, lavender oil, sleep consultants. His assistants scheduled appointments like it was a funding round. Nothing worked. The twins cried. Always, especially at night, "I'm sorry." He whispered to them, not sure if it was meant for the babies or their mother. Maybe both. Maybe himself. He remembered the way Naomi would hum to Arya, stroking her cheek, dark curls curling around her fingers. Ezra had always favored Elliot, reaching toward his deeper voice. But now neither child responded to him. They flailed and wailed as if resisting his very presence. Sleep came in 15-minute intervals. Guilt came in waves, always crashing at once. He had buried her, but not the truth. And the truth was, he had never really understood Naomi. He hadn't noticed how her smile tightened at corporate dinners, how she bristled when strangers asked. She was the nanny. He hadn't stopped the nurse who'd called her sweetheart. During labor and then dismissed her cries of pain, Naomi had squeezed his hand so tightly, it bruised. She was gone by morning. Hemorrhage. Unforeseeable, they said. He hadn't known what questions to ask. Or maybe he had and didn't want the answers. The phone rang. Elliot used his elbow too. Tap speaker. The name on the screen. Ruth Solomon. Ruth, it's Elliot. A long pause. What do you want? Her voice was flint. I need help. The twins. I can't get them to sleep. You think I can fix that? No, I thought maybe you'd want to see them. Naomi would have. Naomi died, begging you to see what she lived through. Goodbye. Click. The silence that followed wasn't quiet. The baby still cried. But something about Ruth's voice, a mix of rage and heartbreak, cut through the white noise. He stood there, clutching the children tighter, heart pounding. Outside, the wind pressed against the window panes. Rain streaked the glass in fat, heavy lines like fingers dragging down a mirror. The nursery door stood ajar. Inside, mobiles spun silently above cribs untouched by sleep. The walls were too white, to bear. Naomi had wanted mural stars and constellations for Ezra, blooming vines for Arya, but he'd insisted on minimalism. Neutral, he had said. He realized now neutral had always meant his comfort. Elliot gently placed the twins in their cribs, even as they screamed. He didn't sing, he didn't hum. He just stood there, paralyzed by his own presence, surrounded by things but devoid of meaning. Somewhere deep in the house, a draft moaned through the vents. The baby's cries folded into it. One more layer of ache in a home built to impress, but never to hold grief. Tomorrow, he would try again. Maybe interview another nanny. But tonight, the house would remain restless. Like him, Elliot hadn't planned to answer the door himself. But the chime startled him soft, deliberate, as if the person on the other side knew the house was still in mourning. He opened it, expecting another overconfident agency hire with a list of credentials and no idea how to hold a screaming child. Instead, she stood there in the rain, steady and still. A modest coat, worn leather boots, a canvas satchel darkened by moisture. Her hand rested lightly on the gate as if she was still deciding whether to come closer. She looked younger than her voice would later sound. Calm, not cold. I'm Mira Solomon, she said. Naomi's sister gave me your contact. Elliot blinked. Ruth. Mira nodded. She said you were struggling. He stepped aside. She walked in without asking permission, and somehow it didn't feel invasive. Her presence was quiet, but certain, like she belonged in a space she'd never entered before. Inside, the twins wailed from the nursery. Mira set down her satchel and removed her coat with careful, unhurried hands. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward the cries. Elliot hesitated, then nodded. She entered the nursery and, without ceremony, picked up Ezra. Then Arya. Her arms moved fluidly, one baby in, each as if she had known them always. Within minutes, the cries quieted into soft, hiccuping breaths. Elliot leaned against the doorway, stunned. It wasn't just that they stopped crying, it was how they settled into her, melting into the space between her heartbeat and theirs. The room, for the first time in months, felt inhabited instead of haunted. "You didn't say you were a professional nanny," he offered carefully. "I didn't," she said, eyes on the twins. "I've cared for children. My mother ran a center in the Bronx, and I worked in maternal care for 5 years. She didn't say where. She didn't need to." Her tone said more than her resume ever could. He wanted to ask how she'd done it, how she'd made them sleep. Instead, what came out was, "How do you know Ruth?" Mira looked up. "You married my cousin, Mr. Hargrove. I knew Naomi." The air shifted. She said the name the way no one else had since the funeral, like Naomi wasn't a ghost but a person. A whole one. Elliot swallowed. "I didn't know Naomi kept in touch with anyone." "She didn't? Not much." Mira's voice gentled, but her eyes sharpened. "Did Naomi feel safe here?" He faltered. "Of course, I think so." Mira looked back at the babies. Thinking and knowing aren't the same. The words didn't accuse, but they didn't absolve either. In that moment, Elliot understood something he couldn't name. Mira was here for the children, yes, but also for something else. A quiet excavation, a reckoning. "Will you stay?" he asked. Not sure if he meant tonight or longer. Mira nodded. "For now." As she laid the twins in their cribs, Elliot noticed how her hands, though strong, trembled slightly. Not from fear, but memory. Outside, the rain softened into mist. Inside, for the first time, the silence felt like peace. Mira moved through the house with quiet purpose, her steps deliberate, her presence still tender, but more assured. The twins responded to her now without hesitation. Ira reached for Mira before milk, and Ezra would stop mid-cry the moment she entered the room. In their world, she was a constant, soft resistance against the sorrow that lingered in every corner. But the house itself, its marble, its spotless symmetry, its unyielding whiteness was less welcoming. It began with the gardener, passing, glanced too long to be neutral. Then the chef, who politely reminded her to use the back entrance. She hadn't even asked for access. The laundry woman gave her a once-over and asked if she needed to rest between shifts. Mira didn't react. She couldn't. She'd learned long ago how to let it slide, because not letting it slide cost more. One afternoon, she walked the twins in the garden. A neighbor stopped at the hedged wall. "The yours?" she asked with a tight smile. "They belong to their father," Mira said evenly. The woman frowned. "Of course. I just meant, well, you don't see many nannies like you up here." Mira nodded politely. Not many children like them either. Elliot watched from the study, the window cracked. He heard enough. He closed the blinds. He told himself it was just awkwardness. People didn't mean harm. The woman didn't call Mira a name. It wasn't that bad, but it lingered. Guilt settled in Elliot's chest like dust on the windowsills. He never noticed before Mira arrived. Mira knew the signs. The soft racism, the kind with a smile. It didn't bruise the skin, but it lingered in memory, became muscle tension, headaches, silence. She'd spent most of her adult life suppressing it, correcting her tone so she wouldn't seem too much, carrying herself with grace so she wouldn't be difficult. She thought of Naomi often now. The way her cousin used to roll her eyes after meetings, to mimic the voices of men who'd called her articulate like it was a compliment. Mira had laughed back then. Now she understood Naomi had never truly laughed, only survived. Late one. Night Mira passed by the laundry room and heard the housekeeper muttering into her phone. She walks around like she owns the place. Honestly, I don't know how they keep landing jobs with families like this. Myra stopped at the door. Is there a problem? The housekeeper jumped. Excuse me? You were talking about me? Was expressing an opinion in private. Amira's voice didn't rise. Then say it to me directly next time. Unseen behind the hallway wall, Elliot stood frozen. He had followed the sound. He had heard it all. But when the silence that followed stretched thin, he turned back toward the study. He told himself it wasn't the right time. Mira had handled it. Confronting the housekeeper might embarrass her. His rationalizations rang hollow in his ears. That night, Mira walked outside alone, needing breath. The security light snapped on harsh, interrogating. She squinted, one hand shielding her eyes. Inside, the hallway was pristine. A child's rattle lay abandoned on the polished floor, forgotten in a house too focused on surfaces, as Mira picked it up. She didn't cry. She simply tucked it into her pocket and returned to the nursery. The house was dressed in gold. Glittering streamers curled from chandeliers. Tiered cakes sat untouched beneath domes of glass. A live quartet played something soft and forgettable in the far corner, and a string of photographers wandered like ghosts, capturing curated joy. Elliot watched as Arya swatted frosting onto her face, giggling. Ezra clung to Mira's neck, his cheek buried against her shoulder. Mira smiled gently, rocking him as if the world were quiet. She had dressed simply navy. Blouse, pressed slacks button, stood out regardless. The guests were almost all white, circling like planets in suits and pastels. Elliot had invited them for appearances, investors, old friends, the press. But now, they seemed like intruders. He saw it in the glances, the way some looked at Mira, then at the children, and then back again, confused, calculating. The tension built slowly, like condensation on a glass. Then came the spill. A woman in coral silks. Someone's wife. Elliot couldn't remember, tripped slightly as her drink slipped, red wine bleeding across the white carpet like a wound. Oh, she gasped. Then she turned toward Myra and waved a hand. Sweetie, could you grab a cloth? This is going to stain. The room paused. Mira didn't move. Her face was calm, but Elliot noticed the flicker, microsecond of breath held too tightly. Her eyes didn't narrow. Her hands didn't tighten around Ezra. She simply stood there. I'm not staff, she said evenly. Oh, the woman laughed, a brittle sound. I just assumed you did. Mira's voice remained level. You assumed? Silence spread, sticky and hot. Then the quartet resumed, awkwardly, and guests began murmuring again, pretending nothing had happened. Saw it all, felt it like a crack across glass. Something inside him splintered, not because it was new, but because this time it was loud enough for everyone to hear. Later that night, the lights dimmed, the decorations drooped. The twins were finally asleep.
I rested.
Stood in the kitchen, washing. Ezra's bid by hand. Elliot leaned against the counter. Why didn't you say something earlier? About all of it. She didn't turn. Would you have listened? I am now. Mira dried her hands slowly, then turned to face him. Think what happened tonight was rare. It's not. That's what exhausts me. Not the moment, but the millions of moments no one sees. I'm sorry. She didn't soften. You don't need to understand. You need to believe me. I want to. I do. I just never saw it. She stepped closer, eyes steady.
That's...
The problem? You didn't have to. He looked down, then nodded. That's going to change. Outside, the moonlight bled across the marble patio. Inside, Myra picked up a forgotten party hat from the floor and placed it gently in the trash. She didn't speak again that night, but in the nursery. The twins slept soundly, oblivious to the fault lines beginning to shift beneath them. The guest bedroom smelled faintly of lavender and old paper. Mira had come looking for spare blankets. Ezra had kicked his off again and opened the linen closet without thought. Stacked towels, spare sheets, and at the very back a low cabinet with a brushed brass handle. It stuck slightly. She tugged, sighed a locked drawer, Her fingers hesitated. She shouldn't pry, but something instinct or intuition urged her on. She fetched a small hairpin from her satchel. The lock clicked open easily. Inside lay a slim, leather-bound journal, its edges curled, its surface worn like skin remembered. Mira sat on the floor, legs folded beneath her. The house was silent, except for the faint hum of the baby monitor. She opened to the first page. Naomi's handwriting greeted her confident loops, familiar rhythm. February 3rd. Elliot's investor called me articulate today. I smiled. He smiled. That was the deal, right? March 14th. The nurse asked if I was sure I was married to the father. I laughed too loud. Elliot didn't notice. June 22nd. I told Elliot I didn't want to go to that fundraiser. Said I'd light up the room. I wanted to scream. Instead, I wore the red dress. Each page peeled back layers Mira had long suspected but hoped weren't true. Naomi hadn't just been exhausted from motherhood. She'd been worn down slowly, steadily by 1,000 small wounds, dismissals, condescension, erasure. Mira's breath hitched as she read the final entry. I'm scared they won't believe me if something goes wrong during delivery. Lack. Women die like this, quietly, elegantly, respectfully, but still dead. Mira pressed her forehead to the pages, eyes burning. Later that evening in the nursery, she sat in the rocking chair, journal on her lap. The twins were asleep. Their faces looked so much like Naomi's when they dreamed. Elliot entered quietly. He looked at her, then the journal. What is that? He asked. She left it here, Mira said. Or maybe left it for someone. Crossed the room slowly, unsure. I never saw that before. I believe you. He sat beside her on the floor, the mobile above them turning gently. She was struggling. She was surviving, Mira said, voice low. We thought. She was happy. She just didn't want your pity. He stared at the carpet. Why didn't she tell me? Because she couldn't. Because you wouldn't have known what to do with it. I would have tried. She didn't need you to try. She needed you to see. Elliot reached out and touched the edge of the journal like it might crumble. What do I do with this? Mira closed the book gently. Start by not forgetting it. The nursery light flickered gently above them. Ezra shifted in his sleep. Outside, wind moved through the hedges, brushing the glass like a whisper. Inside, a quiet resolve settled between them. Tomorrow, Leah would face what it meant to know and not act. But tonight, Naomi's truth had a voice again. It began with a letter anonymous. It's unsigned, printed in elegant serif font on thick cardstock. It arrived folded inside Elliot's mailbox like an invitation, the kind of paper meant for weddings or fundraisers. But the message was clear. Several neighbors have expressed concern regarding the unfamiliar individual frequently seen on your property. For the safety and comfort of our community, we hope you'll consider making adjustments. Mira, they meant Mira. Elliot read it twice before placing it on the kitchen island. He didn't tell her right away. He wasn't sure how. 2 days later, the petition appeared. Dozens of signatures, veiled in language like home security, gated community standards, and unregulated employees. And just like that, the war began. Elliot stood in front of a row of cameras flanked by hedge-lined sidewalks and reporters with clipped voices. His publicist had begged him to release a neutral statement. You have investors to think about. But his voice didn't waver. If your version of safe means denying my children dignity, then we are not safe. Mira Solomon is part of this. Family. She is not the threat. The threat is a world that believes her presence here is one. The backlash was immediate. His company's stock dipped. 2 board members resigned. Clients pulled out of deals, citing brand misalignment. Hashtags twisted his name, accusing him of virtue signaling, of injecting race into everything. Mira watched from the edge of the nursery, arms folded. Arya clung to her leg. Ezra babbled in her arms, unaware of the storm gathering outside. She didn't speak for hours, just watched, observed, waited. That night, she stood at the back patio. While protesters marched past the gates, signs rose. Protect our kids. Stop political nannies. Who's watching the watchers? Someone trampled Naomi's flower bed. It's the one she'd planted during her second trimester. Mira didn't flinch. Elliot came out beside her, his shoulders tense. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "Yes," he answered. "I did." She studied him for the first time, not as Naomi's husband, not as her employer, but as a man standing alone in the wreckage of his own education. Her voice was quiet. "They won't stop. I know. You'll lose more. Let them go." She looked at him, guarded hope flickering in her chest, wary of it. "You've changed?" "I haven't," he admitted. "I've just started listening." Inside, the twins slept through the noise, through the chants, through the panic. Peace, Mira thought, wasn't the absence of conflict. It was choosing who you'd protect when conflict came. A protester's chant rose louder. Someone threw a soda can at the gate. It clanged against the metal and rolled into Naomi's garden. Mira stepped forward and picked it up. She crushed it in her hand, slow and deliberate, and dropped it into the recycling bin without a word. And in the silence that followed, Elliot reached for the journal once more. The house still had marble floors and vaulted ceilings, but the silence that once pressed on its walls had softened. Where echoes of grief once clung, now came bursts of laughter, small feet slapping against the floor, toy pianos clinking with childish chaos. Mira stood in the nursery, morning sunlight spilling through gauzy curtains. Ezra dozed with a book on his chest. Arya snuggled against a stuffed giraffe. A framed photo of Naomi sat on the windowsill. She was laughing, caught mid-motion, hair wild in the wind. The foundation had launched 3 months ago, the Naomi Hargrove Initiative for Black Maternal Health. What began with a journal had become a movement. Mira now led a team of doulas, nurses, and educators. Her days were full, her voice in demand, but she returned to this house each evening, not out of obligation, but love. These children were her tethered to Naomi, her reminder that legacy is not about wealth, but impact. Downstairs, Elliot was in the playroom, assembling a plastic castle with the twins' names etched on it. He still flinched at his blind spots, still carried the shame of what he hadn't seen. But he listened now deeply, unflinchingly. And when Mira spoke, he didn't interrupt. At night, he read Naomi's journal aloud to himself. Not to understand her fully, he never would, but to remember, to witness. To keep her real, Myra looked down at the sleeping twins and whispered, "Your mother changed everything. I just helped you hear her." A breeze lifted the curtains. Somewhere downstairs, a timer dinged, and Elliot's voice called out, "Snack. Time." The twins stirred. Myra smiled. She traced the edge of Naomi's photo, then tucked it closer to the light. In the hallway hung new photos, Naomi holding the twins. Mira, reading with Arya, Elliot in the garden, dirt on his jeans, smiling without pose. No perfection, just presence. Peace, Mira had learned, doesn't erase pain. It grows beside it. It is earned. It is fed by truth, and in this house, once filled with white noise quiet, had finally found a home.